Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tangmen based on novel. So let's start. Jing Xian was also busy. At this point, she was in her own room, adjusting her storage type soul tool. At times, she would retrieve items that looked like stones. These stones weren't very eye-catching, and they were only slightly bigger than an adult man's fist. However, Jing Xian was very careful, because she had once witnessed how destructive these stones were. Ji Juechen was sitting on a chair not far away, and silently watched her as she busied herself. He suddenly said, "Can you stop smiling?" Jing Xian was shocked, and a stone in her hand suddenly slipped. Jing Xian hurriedly reached out and grabbed it again. After that, she patted her chest and said, "Hey, can you not scare me when I'm dealing with these things? If they explode, we'll be critically hurt if we don't die. I just couldn't take it anymore. Furthermore, I remembered Huo Yuhao said before that they have to be detonated. Even if they drop on the ground, they won't explode," Ji Juechen said. Jing Xian snorted. "What can't you take anymore? Even if it won't explode, we need to be careful. It's better to be safe. It's not like you've ever seen the strength of these things." Ji Juechen said, "I couldn't take your expression anymore. Do you know how sinister you looked earlier? You looked just like a little fox." Jing Xian snapped, "You're more like a little fox. Have you ever seen a little fox carrying a bunch of bombs? Hey, why are you so talkative today? It's not like you." As she spoke, she picked up a few of the bombs before she turned around and looked suspiciously at Ji Juechen. Ji Juechen's cold expression suddenly changed, and Jing Xian was shocked. Is he embarrassed? Or is he being shy? Heavens! What's wrong with you, Juechen? Are you sick? Jing Xian walked towards him as she spoke. "Stop!" Ji Juechen suddenly shouted. Jing Xian immediately stopped and gave him a doubtful look. "I'm fine, I'm not sick." Ji Juechen smacked his own forehead, as if he were trying to calm himself down. "Then what's wrong with you?" Jing Xian stared at him doubtfully. Ji Juechen lowered his head and seemed to be thinking of something. Fortunately, this didn't last very long. He suddenly lifted his head again and said to Jing Xian, "Xian, how long have we known each other?" "Oh, several years already. We got to know each other when no one was willing to interact with you when you first entered the academy. Back then, you were only admitted to the academy to make up the numbers. After that, you found a suitable path, and I watched you progress to where you are now." "Why?" Ji Juechen's gaze suddenly became determined. "Let's get together." Jing Xian was confused as she said, "Haven't we always been together?" However, she was stunned when she looked at Ji Juechen's eyes clearly. 3 of the stones in her hand fell out and crashed to the ground. It did prove that the stones wouldn't explode. However, Jing Xian's expression was extremely terrified at this moment. She was frozen in disbelief, and couldn't imagine what was happening to her right now. Her expression perfectly displayed how she was feeling. What are you? Speak clearly, what do you mean?" Jing Xian's voice was trembling uncontrollably, as if the most terrifying thing in this world had happened to her. Ji Juechen lowered his head again, and didn't dare to look her in the eyes. He muttered, "I said that we should get together. You are right. We've known each other for years, and you've always been by my side helping me, encouraging me and taking care of me. Although I never once commented on any of it, I know it in my heart. After Huo Yuhao unleashed his 3 skills that day, I realized that I've been detached from this world for too long. There shouldn't just be swords in my world, because swords can't help me reach the peak that I've always wanted to reach. I should be like a normal person. I should have relationships. I only know one lady, and that is you. In addition, I feel like I can only think of you. Let's get together, shall we?" As he raised his head again, Jing Xian saw a trace of anticipation and nervousness in his eyes. "I'm not pretty." Jing Xian seemed to grit her teeth as she said these few words. Her eyes were already on the verge of tearing up at this moment. "You are the only lady in my eyes. You are just like my sword. Also, do you think I'm very concerned about your beauty?" Jing Xian shifted her head to one side and tried to stop her tears from flowing. "I'm not gentle, either. I'm competitive, and I like to fight. I might beat you up at any time." Those are precisely the reasons why we should get together. Ji Juechen seemed to become a little tense. Are you willing? He started to seem a little depressed right now. This was probably the most he had spoken in the past 10 years, and it was also the day where his mood had experienced the greatest changes. At this moment, he suddenly realized that his sword intent had met some kind of problem. It was as if it had been punctured by some ridiculous thing. Jing Xian raised her head, and her tears flowed down her cheeks. Heaven! You've finally opened your eyes. When she looked at Ji Juechen again, her gaze had already turned sharp. She took one step forward and came over in front of him. After this, she sat on his lap and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. They looked into each other's eyes at this close distance. From this moment onwards, you are my man. You can't turn back, and there's no time limit. Do you know how long I've been waiting for this day? From today onwards, Yuhao is my benefactor. Scoundrel. Her tears flowed again, but she kissed his lips as if she had gone crazy, and held tightly onto his head. Her tears also flowed onto his face in an instant. Ji Juechen was stupefied, completely stupefied. He only felt a force that he had never experienced, or imagined before coming from Jing Xian's body. This force had nothing to do with her soul power or fighting, but it struck his heart with an unprecedented momentum. His sword intent melted at this point. Jing Xian's slightly salty yet soft lips, and the inexperienced kiss that she planted on his lips, lit a fire in his heart. Gradually, Ji Juechen recovered from his shock. His hands wrapped around Jing Xian's waist as he hugged her tightly. He started to be the active one. While he was as inexperienced as Jing Xian, he was more aggressive and offensive as he sensed that force. His love was like his sword, they both needed a flash of realization. Just like Jing Xian had said, he had finally gotten it right. The feelings that he had been keeping in his heart for so long had finally erupted, and they couldn't be stopped. In this perilous city, they had finally taken that defining step, and removed the thin barrier between them. Huo Yuhao, Shusansha and Yi Gai arrived at the south end of the city. They were less than 50 meters from the south wall. It was noon, and the three of them found a small, ordinary restaurant to dine at. This restaurant also fit their status according to their dress. After ordering a few small dishes, they started to eat their lunch. Huo Yuhao was sitting in a corner of the restaurant, Shusansha sat next to him, while Yi Gai sat opposite him. It was very difficult for anyone to notice him. He unleashed his spiritual detection and directed it underground. It drilled through the ground like a sharp awl. Penetrating the city wall to survey the area beyond it would take a toll on his spiritual power, while going over the city wall would change the direction of his spiritual power, which would make it difficult to control. Thus, Huo Yuhao chose to go underground. The south wall was indeed more tightly guarded than other places in the city. As Huo Yuhao scanned upward, he discovered that there were more thermal and soul power detectors here than at the northern city gate. Furthermore, there were also a few hidden offensive soul tools above this wall. The outer perimeter was tightly guarded. Huo Yuhao kept on moving his spiritual power diagonally downward. The foundation of the city wall only reached a depth of 10 meters. After 10 meters, Huo Yuhao's spiritual power managed to extend beneath it. As he ranged further underground, he exhausted his spiritual power greatly. It was only because of his immense spiritual cultivation that he was able to unleash such strong spiritual power and control. After reaching close to 30 meters underground, Huo Yuhao felt less resistance to his spiritual power as it entered water. City moat. This has to be the city moat. Huo Yuhao was delighted, and continued to move his spiritual detection down. At the same time, he also moved it further to either side. The water was a little polluted, but the senses from his spiritual power were detached from his body. They weren't like his vision. Very soon, Huo Yuhao's spiritual power had swept more than 50 meters of polluted water, but he didn't discover anything. There was only silt at the bottom of the moat. With his spiritual power, he could only go 10 meters below the layer of silt before he started to feel dizzy. Huo Yuhao lifted his head and shut his eyes slightly. He took a deep breath to soothe his spiritual power. How is it? Shusansha asked softly. Huo Yuhao shook his head and said, I can't. There's too big of an area to survey. The length of the south wall is quite extensive. I can only search slowly. Third senior, cover me. I'll try to use my Eye of Destiny. Perhaps I'll be able to sense more that way. All right. Huo Yuhao gulped down a glass of clear water in front of him before he placed his elbows on the table. His palms were naturally supporting his forehead, but covered the center of it. His eye of destiny opened. When it opened, Xusanxia and Yi Gai had a feeling that Huo Yuhao was illusory. A strange aura came from his head, but this feeling only lasted for an instant. However, they could still clearly see that Huo Yuhao had become different, even scarier. Huo Yuhao unleashed his spiritual power again, the penetrative abilities of his spiritual power a few times stronger now. In a matter of seconds, he entered the moat once again. Under his control, his spiritual power swept its surroundings and covered a greater area. He couldn't do this all day. After all, it wasn't possible to construct anything under this layer of silt. Furthermore, Feng Ling's words weren't very clear, and he wasn't able to determine the actual location of the water prison. From what Feng Ling had mentioned, he only recalled 3 useful phrases: South Wall, City Moat, and Water Prison. As he scanned his surroundings, he soon reached 200 meters in distance. As the area that he covered grew, he was able to detect more things with the help of his Eye of Destiny. He slowly sensed traces of a gloomy, despondent aura. This feeling came mostly from the eastern end of the South Wall. He quickly shifted the direction of his spiritual detection. Indeed, this despondent feeling became stronger and stronger the more he moved east. The draw on his spiritual power kept on increasing, and Huo Yuhao called to the Skydream Iceworm, "Brother Skydream, give me a hand." Skydream's lazy voice sounded in his spiritual sea. "Okay." The ring on Huo Yuhao's finger, that the Skydream Iceworm, had changed into lost its glow. In Huo Yuhao's spiritual sea, the Skydream Iceworm surfaced, and slowly released the strength of his pure spiritual origin into Huo Yuhao's spiritual sea. Suddenly, Huo Yuhao's spiritual power became much stronger. His spiritual power continued to move east, and he finally found something suspicious. It was at a position around 300 meters to his east, and around 3 meters below the riverbank close to this side of the south wall. There was an iron fence, which was constructed out of thick, fine iron. The despondent and gloomy aura came from there, which meant it either had to be the entrance and exit of the water prison, or an opening for the flow of water into or out of the water prison. Huo Yuhao heaved a sigh of relief after making this discovery. There were finally clues. He quickly retracted his spiritual detection, and shut his Eye of Destiny. Just this short while had caused his spiritual power to be greatly drained. If not for the fact that it was already in the concrete material realm, he wouldn't have been able to take it. "Let's go. Let's take a walk." Huo Yuhao secretly signaled to Xusanxia and Yi Gai before they quickly settled the bill and left the restaurant. After that, they proceeded towards the south wall. Huo Yuhao's spiritual power could only reach 30 meters away from the city wall. There were already people shouting, cursing, and chasing people away from the top of the city wall, while patrols began to pay attention to Huo Yuhao and the others. The 3 of them hurriedly switched directions, and put on a submissive demeanor as they followed the southern city wall towards the east. Huo Yuhao relayed what he had just observed to Xusanxia and Yi Gai as they walked. "What do you plan to do?" Xusanxia asked. Huo Yuhao answered, "We have to go inside and take a look. We will use the same method as we did back at Radiant City. Afterwards, you guys will book a room in a nearby inn, while Gai will go back and relay our plans to the others. Third senior brother, you will protect me. Tonight, I will release my spiritual avatar, so that I can take a look inside." Xusanxia frowned and said, "Isn't that too dangerous? There are evil soul masters inside, and every evil soul master is adept at controlling souls and spirits. Furthermore, there are so many surveillance soul tools. Will those things affect you?" Huo Yuhao shook his head and said, "Surveillance soul tools can't deal with spiritual power, so it's safest if I send my spiritual avatar inside. I will be as careful as I can, and I will immediately pull out and run away if something is amiss." Investigating and scouting with Huo Yuhao's spiritual avatar was drastically different from using spiritual detection. Spiritual detection could be withdrawn in an instant, and Huo Yuhao would have nothing to fear even if he was discovered. After all, his enemies could only lock onto his location if they were very close, or if they possessed formidable spiritual power, like that evil soul master he had dispatched the other day. Huo Yuhao could just open his Eye of Destiny to shake off his enemies even if they had locked onto his location. However, he could reach a lot further with his spiritual avatar, and he would have a lot more flexibility. However, his spiritual avatar was formed from his spiritual power and part of his spirit, and that entity wasn't something that he could withdraw at a whim. Huo Yuhao would definitely be heavily injured if his enemies were able to restrain or destroy his spiritual avatar. This endeavor was a lot more perilous. Of course, his spiritual avatar would give him the best investigation and reconnaissance results. The Tang sect didn't have a better alternative solution for now. Xusanxia deliberated for a moment before he patted Huo Yuhao on his shoulder and said, "Be careful, then. Let's go and find a place to stay. Gai, come back after you return to inform others, and you will join me to protect Yuhao. It'll be a lot safer if we have one more person protecting him." "All right." Yi Gai agreed straightforwardly and happily. Sunrise City wasn't a large, vibrant, and bustling city, so searching for a small inn wasn't too difficult. They quickly found an inn that was more decrepit than the one that they had stayed in on city's northern side and booked 3 rooms. Huo Yuhao immediately began to meditate in the center room after everyone settled down. He tried to recover the spiritual power that he had expended before, while Xusanxia watched the landscape and their surroundings, and Gai returned to the city's northern side. The 3 of them worked together as they made their preparations nervously. Time always passed rapidly during meditation, and the sky was now darkening. Huo Yuhao didn't have anything to eat, but he was back to his full strength and energy. He informed Xusanxia before he immediately released his spiritual avatar. Huo Yuhao released his spiritual avatar a lot more smoothly than back then. Furthermore, Huo Yuhao released a lot more spiritual power and more of his spirit, so that he could accomplish as much as he could on this reconnaissance mission. Xusanxia was full of awe and admiration as he watched a faint golden projection that looked identical to Huo Yuhao appear in front of him. Third senior brother. Huo Yuhao's original body was just sitting there while his spiritual avatar greeted Xusanxia. Xusanxia sounded a little helpless as he said, "Go, quickly. I'm afraid that your spirit will split." Huo Yuhao chortled and said, "You don't understand us spiritual type soul masters' control over spiritual power. I'll be fine. Just wait and see what I can do. Here I go." Huo Yuhao's spiritual avatar drifted into the air as he spoke, and he sipped out the window quickly. The pale golden hues disappeared from the air at the same time. Huo Yuhao could attach even more abilities to his spiritual avatar after his spiritual power and his ability to control it were enhanced. Of course, he could only attach abilities that belonged to his spirit eyes. Huo Yuhao activated imitation, and his spiritual avatar vanished into the night sky as he left the inn. He was in spiritual form, but his spiritual avatar was a product of his concrete immaterial spiritual power, similar to his original body. Huo Yuhao could only fly at a certain height above the ground. Otherwise, he would be affected by the winds in the sky, and he would expend a lot more spiritual power. He could even run the risk of shaking and damaging his spirit. Huo Yuhao's spiritual avatar was completely concealed at this moment. Just as Huo Yuhao had said, the surveillance soul tools on top of the city wall were useless against him. Huo Yuhao's spiritual avatar quickly scaled the city wall, and he arrived by the city's moat. Inside the city, Huo Yuhao was still sitting inside the inn with his legs crossed. He gestured to Xusanxia to signal that everything was all right, before he entered meditation right away, and focused all his strength and energy on controlling his spiritual avatar, as he disappeared into the river water. Huo Yuhao's spiritual avatar trembled conspicuously as he entered the turbid river water. Huo Yuhao had to consume a lot more spiritual power when his spiritual avatar was inside the water, but he had already found the right place before this, so his expedition was still relatively smooth for now. Huo Yuhao went right through the iron fencing beneath the water and swam forward swiftly. His spiritual avatar activated spiritual detection at the same time and searched around in front of him. The river water behind the iron fence was still as turbid as before. Huo Yuhao controlled his spiritual avatar and swam forward for several dozen meters, and felt he had swum back into the city from under its walls. Abruptly, everything in front of him changed, and he could hear some sounds. Huo Yuhao's spiritual avatar emerged from the water's surface and immediately witnessed a shocking sight. Feng Lin was right, this place was a water prison. The entire place was constructed from tough granite, while row after row of steel cages were neatly arranged. The water prison covered an incredibly large surface area. There were between 8 to 10 people imprisoned inside each cage, and each cage was filled with water that was at least 1 meter deep, so the turbid water soaked everyone. Almost every single prisoner trapped inside had ghastly pale faces, and their auras were extremely weak. The prisoners inside this water prison almost couldn't rest, and they could only lean to one side. Huo Yuhao vaguely identified these prisoners as the team members and leaders that belonged to the various academies and sects who had gone to Radiant City to participate in the Continental Elite Youth Soul Master Tournament. Huo Yuhao and the Tang sect had even crossed paths with some of these people during the tournament. However, their auras were all very weak at this moment, and not a single soul power undulation appeared on their bodies. Huo Yuhao withdrew his spiritual detection after a brief scan of the area. He was sure that evil soul masters stood guard in this place, and he had no idea if there were more spiritual type evil soul masters present. Furthermore, his spiritual power was too strong, so even normal evil soul masters could easily detect him if they were a little more sensitive. Huo Yuhao began to inspect and survey those cages and recognized more and more familiar faces inside them. Huo Yuhao didn't know most of their names, but he had impressions of them to varying extents. He heaved a faint sigh inside. These people are all elites and prodigies of their generation. They could represent their respective academies and sects for that tournament. Which of them isn't one of the most outstanding individuals of the younger generation? The Sun Moon Empire risked universal condemnation by imprisoning them. They had thoroughly and completely antagonized the Doluo continent's 3 native empires while using these hostages to suppress and restrain the academies and sects that belonged to the Doluo continent's 3 native empires, so that they wouldn't join a war or conflict between the empires so easily. The Sun Moon Empire was treacherous and scheming at the same time. There were 2 main rows of water prisons. There was a stone platform about 1 meter above the water's surface in the middle of these 2 rows. This stone platform stretched straight forward, and several guards in black cloaks paced and patrolled back and forth. Huo Yuhao didn't have to deliberately survey those patrols to feel the evil and chilly auras that emanated from these evil soul masters. This water prison was located within the city's walls, and this meant that Feng Lin's information wasn't entirely accurate. The water prison borrowed the city's moat, but it was located within the city walls, not outside. Furthermore, Huo Yuhao could tell from how the water was directed and diverted that there was undoubtedly an entrance within the city that led into this water prison. Huo Yuhao had an exceptionally strong sense of direction. It only took him a moment of thought to roughly determine this entrance's position. What rendered him a little speechless was that this entrance was actually located inside a bunker beside the southern city wall. Bunkers were specifically designed to accommodate soldiers, so that they could rest temporarily when they were defending the city. This bunker was located next to the city gate, and soldiers inside it could swiftly reinforce the city gate if they went down, while they could rapidly ascend to the top of the city wall if they went up. What a great arrangement, indeed. Bunkers were always guarded by soldiers at any point in time. Adding on the countless surveillance soul tools that were located near the city gate, and infiltrating this bunker without being discovered was almost impossible. Huo Yuhao was about to make his judgment when he suddenly saw several evil soul masters walk over to his position. The evil soul masters, who had been patrolling before this, separated respectfully to both sides of the stone platform. Every single one of these patrols bent down and looked very respectful and reverent. The evil soul masters who were strolling over didn't have cloaks covering their bodies, and Huo Yuhao was actually familiar with them. Those walking in front of everyone else were the 3rd elder and the 4th elder. Huo Yuhao had seen them before at the Radiant City Elite Soul Engineering Tournament. The 3rd elder had considered taking him in as his disciple then. Huo Yuhao was even more familiar with those who followed behind these 2 elders. They were the 3 evil brothers, Zhong Litian, Zhong Lidi, and Zhong Liren. All 3 of them were 8-ringed evil soul Doluo, and they were adept at manipulating all kinds of beast souls to fight for them. Huo Yuhao had rescued 2 infant dark golden terraclaw bears from their evil clutches back then, and the Tang sect had been taking good care of them. The bears were growing very quickly, and Bei Bei had even requested specialists from Shrek Academy's Beast Dueling Division to procure a diet so that the Tang sect could feed them better. The bears were still young, but their strength was increasing at an alarming rate. Right now, they were strong enough to stand guard at the Tang sect's main gate. The bears had been most intimate with Huo Yuhao and Wang Donga before this, but Huo Yuhao didn't have much time for them now because there were just so many things he had to do. Huo Yuhao had already decided that he would bring those bears with him when he ventured into the Setting Sun Forest to help his eldest senior brother search for medicinal herbs to treat teacher Xiaotao. There were only a few immortal herbs that Huo Yuhao could retrieve from the Icefire Yin-Yang well, but there was still quite a lot of supplementary and nutritious items. The dark golden terraclaw bears would have no problem eating a little more because of their physiques, and these herbs could catalyze their growth. The bears would eventually become the Tang sect's divine beast guardians. Huo Yuhao hadn't expected to meet these 5 evil soul masters when he had just arrived, and his real body drew a cold breath when he saw them. 2 of them were titled Doluo, while the other 3 were soul Doluo. The 5 of them had the strength to fight against 5 titled Doluo at the same time. Furthermore, there were at least several dozen evil soul masters stationed in this place, and he had no clue how many other exceptionally powerful evil soul masters were here, and there were 2 soul engineer legions outside. Sunrise City also wasn't that far away from Radiant City, so Radiant City could muster reinforcements in no time. The Sun Moon Empire's arrangements were incredibly meticulous and tight. Battle had to have broken out at the borders, but the Sun Moon Empire could still afford such an arrangement. This level of defensive strength wasn't something that the Tang sect could fight. Huo Yuhao continued to contemplate as he controlled his spiritual avatar and flew over to one of the cages. He hid discreetly in one corner and completely suppressed his spiritual undulations. He didn't dare to release even a single bit of spiritual power. The 3rd and 4th elders scanned the prisoners inside the water prisons as they strolled. The hostages could naturally see them too and glared at them with vengeful eyes as they walked by. However, these hostages were just too weak, and they didn't even have the strength to curse and swear. The 3rd elder said as he walked, "Are we good on our restraints? Are we using enough drugs? We are using enough. We infuse soul eradicating powder into the water every day. With this powder dissolving in the water, not even titled Doluo can think about concentrating and mustering their soul power. Furthermore, these fellows haven't eaten anything in a long time, and they must be weak and limp even with their physiques as soul masters. Several prisoners have fainted, but we gave them sufficient nutrition in time," Zhong Litian answered. The 3rd elder paused and turned back as he glanced at Zhong Litian. "Tian, you still have to give them food. These people can't possibly cause any disturbances or trouble with our soul eradicating powder, but we can't let them starve to death, because they are still very valuable to our leader in the future. I know you and your brothers have a great need for these powerful spirits, but now is not the time. Do you understand?" "Yes, 3rd elder." Zhong Litian nodded. One could tell from his expression that he didn't quite approve of the 3rd elder's words, but he was very respectful towards the man nonetheless. Zhong Litian immediately continued, "I will make the necessary arrangements now, and we will give them some food. 2nd brother, 3rd brother, let's go together." He nodded in the 3rd elder and 4th elder's direction before turning and leaving. A cold look flashed by the 4th elder's eyes as he watched them leave. He lowered his voice and said, "These brothers are pushing it more and more, just because they are the leader's slaves. Do they have to go personally to get some food for those prisoners? They are clearly trying to show defiance." The 3rd elder glanced at the 4th elder, and a disdainful and indifferent look flowed from his eyes. "Don't spout nonsense, 4th brother. The 3 of them are under the leader's personal command, and we are also loyal to the leader. We have to place our church's interests as our top priority." These were his words, but a cold look flickered in his eyes at the same time. He was very displeased with how the 3 brothers were handling things. They followed the stone platform, and went up and down once through the water prison before walking out. Huo Yuhao had been quietly observing them this entire time. He was delighted. These 2 titled Doluo have some beef with the 3 brothers, and furthermore, the 3 brothers should be the ones in control of this water prison. This is important intel. I will have a better chance of rescuing the prisoners if I make good use of this information. Also, what's that soul eradicating powder? The water inside this water prison is connected to moat outside. Are they not afraid of this powder losing its effects? Huo Yuhao drifted discreetly towards the entrance he had come in from. He didn't waste this trip, and had discovered and scouted out many things. He needed to go back so that he could digest everything further before he could determine how to rescue these prisoners. Huo Yuhao was about to submerge himself into the water, and was going to bring back some water samples, when something happened at the stone platform's other end. The 3rd elder and the 4th elder were just walking out when they uttered reverently, "Greetings, Holy Lady." "Holy Lady. The Holy Ghost Church's Holy Lady is here." Huo Yuhao vaguely recalled that Tang Yue had been addressed in a similar fashion. His operation would be a lot harder if teacher Xiao Yue was here. How could he save Tang Yue with his current strength? Huo Yuhao paused in his tracks and looked over to the stone platform's other end. The 3rd elder and the 4th elder were standing on either side of the platform, while the 3 evil brothers and a girl who was clad in a long dark red dress began to walk towards him. Huo Yuhao's eyes went slack when he saw this girl, and he could no longer shift his eyes away. Huo Yuhao lost control of his spiritual undulations, and they became a little disorganized. "Who goes there?" the third elder suddenly snarled. Even though controlling spirits wasn't his forte, he was the strongest amongst the evil soul masters in this place. The third elder immediately detected Huo Yuhao, as soon as his spiritual power showed a little disorder. However, this exclamation jolted Huo Yuhao out of his shock and lifelessness. He didn't dare to stay even a single moment longer, and his spiritual avatar dove into the water in a flash as he started swimming outwards as fast as he could. The girl decked in the flowing dark red dress grunted coldly as she raised her right hand and pressed forward through the air. A thick and intense dark red light instantly drilled through where Huo Yuhao had dove into the water, and the beam's scorching heat immediately dyed the turbid moat's water a dark red color as large amounts of steam surged into the air. Huo Yuhao was still escaping through the water as quickly as he could, and he immediately felt a wave of searing heat attacking him from behind in the next moment. Huo Yuhao wouldn't be afraid if his original body had been here. He would have his ultimate ice to protect him, and any fire-type abilities would have trouble causing him any damage at all. However, at this very moment, he only had his spiritual avatar. His avatar couldn't possibly have his ultimate ice-type soul power. Huo Yuhao's spiritual avatar weakened rapidly as that searing heat assaulted him, and even his spiritual origin was shaken. Huo Yuhao could clearly feel that this heatwave his enemy had launched against him, which was full of heat and darkness, also possessed an ability to track and lock onto spiritual undulations. He had absolutely no chance of escaping before this heatwave could eradicate his spiritual avatar. "Sister!" Huo Yuhao called out desperately, and his spiritual avatar unleashed spiritual shock at the same time. The heatwave that was running him down brutally suddenly paused, and Huo Yuhao immediately took advantage of this instant as he picked up the pace and rushed through the iron fence outside. He emerged from the city's moat and soared into the sky as he followed his original path and escaped through the air. Inside the water prison, the Holy Lady personally took action, so the third elder, the fourth elder, and the three brothers had looked on from the side. They had absolute faith in this Holy Lady's strength. But in the next moment, they watched as the Holy Lady frowned and said, "That's strange, some spiritual undulations did appear before this. Can it be that we are too sensitive? My phoenix flames didn't find anything." The third elder said, "Can it be that there's too much vengeance and resentment inside the water prison, and that has produced a lifeless spiritual form?" The Holy Lady turned towards the three brothers and said, "Check it out carefully." The three brothers were a lot more respectful towards her, and all three of them bowed reverently as they acknowledged, "Yes, Holy Lady." The Holy Lady turned and walked towards the exit. A vacant look that had a tinge of struggle flashed deep in her eyes, but these emotional changes were instantly extinguished by the dark red flames in her eyes. Huo Yuhao scaled the city wall and crossed to the other side after he left the water. He rushed back to the hotel as quickly as he could and reintegrated his spiritual avatar into his body. Jade green light gradually rose through the air, and only then did Huo Yuhao dispel the heat filled with evil that lingered in his spirit. Huo Yuhao expelled a deep breath and gradually opened his eyes. Shusansha and Yi Gai had been protecting him by his side this entire time. They instantly saw the shock deep in Huo Yuhao's eyes the moment he opened his eyes. "What's wrong, Yuhao?" Shusansha asked softly. Huo Yuhao leapt down from his bed and took a deep breath. "Sister Xiaotao. I saw Sister Xiaotao." "Sister Xiaotao. Are you referring to Ma Xiaotao?" An astonished expression immediately came over Shusanshi's face as he stared at Huo Yuhao with blank eyes and slack jaw. He was at a loss for words. Huo Yuhao nodded vigorously. His lips were pressed tightly together, and he couldn't maintain his composure at this moment no matter how much self-control he had. "Yes, it's her, my sister. She's really at the Holy Ghost Church, and they have actually kidnapped her. She's their Holy Lady now." The scene that he had just seen was deeply imprinted in his mind. She was wearing a long dark red dress, and had seemed so coolly elegant and glamorous. She also possessed scorching phoenix flames, so who else could that be but Ma Xiaodao? Ma Xiaodao looked a lot more mature compared to 5 years ago. Her enchanting features had an extra tinge of cold mystery that came from darkness, while her figure had become more exaggerated and alluring. Ma Xiaotao's status had surpassed that of those two elders, who were titled Doluo. Holy Lady, Holy Lady, she was actually addressed as Holy Lady, just like teacher Xiao Ya. What exactly had happened to her? The two of them had no words as they stared at one another. Yi Gai was befuddled as she listened on from one side. Ma Xiaotao. Who's that? Huo Yuhao explained as concisely as he could. She's our senior, and she also graduated from Shrek Academy. Her martial soul had some problems, and she was captured by evil soul masters. She seems confused and is not in her right state of mind right now, and she's become the Holy Ghost Church's holy lady. Yi Gai didn't have a good impression of any evil soul masters. She frowned and asked, how powerful is she? This video will end here.